I love following Sean, mostly because she takes all the great verses that I'm going to preach about and shares them and does a better job of explaining them than I do. So, no ambition here to do any better than that for me, because she does such a great job, awesome job of welcoming us and getting us into the thought process of what I'm about to share. You know, I'm in a series, and it's called Jesus On, and I've had somebody ask, how long are we going to Jesus on? And we're going to Jesus on 7 or 8 more times at least. You know, when Prestonwood first moved over here, we kept asking Pastor Graham, what are you going to preach on? He said, I'm going to preach through the book of John. And he took the whole year, the first year we were there, to preach through John. And I asked him, I said, why'd you choose John? He said, well, I figured we needed to lift Jesus up first thing, and we needed to do it at least for the whole first year. And it served to be fruitful. And I think it was the preaching, not the building, that brought the people. So I love being in this series because you can take anything in life and say Jesus on, and then you can turn to Scripture and find Jesus' opinion on whatever that is. If you're depressed, you can find Jesus' opinion of that. If you're full of shame, you can find his opinion of that. If you want to talk about accomplishments, greed, fear, anxiety, which we've all done. And it mostly comes from, as I run HopeWorks counseling and I do some counseling, my counseling, and I tell anybody that comes to me, a lot of times people will come to you because, you're the head guy, right? They go on the website and they see that you're the director, vice president, whatever, and they want to make an appointment with you because he must be the best. Nay, I'm the worst. I'm the worst counselor in the room because, first of all, the best counseling I do is when they first come in, my first question is, have you gone to Scripture for your problem yet? They kind of look at me funny, and I said, I'll take that as a no. And so I can point you to some scriptures first and foremost, which will save you a ton of money. If you will listen to what Jesus has to say on this particular problem, you'll find peace and you'll be able to go. And then I usually refer them to one of our better people, which that'd be everybody that's there. So I do that, so I've been excited to go through this series. So we're going to talk about ambition, and Sean was right. She said a good ambition is a good thing. So mostly what I'm going to be talking about is Jesus talking about the dark side of ambition. Do you ever love meeting somebody who's really important, right? And they don't act like they're important? And then you meet people who are really important and they act like they're important? It's because they got their ambition kind of moving the wrong direction. Donna and I were on the Newlywed Game in 1970. Now, don't go searching old channels to see if you can find us. Back then, they recorded over the thing over and over again. But the host was Bob Eubanks, and boy, he was the rage. He was the best game show guy there, and he was a jerk the whole time. He's smiling at you, and he's talking to you like he knows you. Hey, Steve and Donna, how, and then the cameras go off, and he goes. So he just got enamored with who he was, and so he wasn't very nice. I had another incident where, and I've had the privilege of meeting a lot of what you call famous people. Well, I got a phone call from an acquaintance of mine he happens to be real wealthy. And he called me and he said, hey, you want to go to the Cowboy game, sit in our box? And I said, yeah, I'd love to. And this is a day before an election. It's in November. And so he said, I'll curry over the tickets. And he said, you just take the tickets and put them up on your dashboard. Well, I got to tell you about the ticket. The ticket was that long, and it was that thick, and it was made of silver. And there were 4 of them. Silver. I was thinking of just hawking them and not going to the game. But I called Rick and Jane Fambro. I said, hey, you guys want to go to the game? And they said, yeah. So I went by and picked them up. And Donna couldn't go because she didn't feel good. And so we go to the game. Now, if you've ever been to the Cowboy game, parking's a mess, all right? And you pull in, and the first parking that you can find, which is about 3 miles away, $75. And they said, just put this thing up on your dashboard. So I put it up on the dashboard. And as soon as I get there, some guy whistles at me and goes like this. Just go around him. So I go around him. We get to the $100 parking lot. Guy whistles at me. Go around. We get to the $150. Go around. $200. Go around. And we get all the way, we're all the way up to AT&T Stadium. I mean, like, it's right there. And there's a van and a police officer. And the police officer looks at our ticket and says, pop your trunk, please. Pop the trunk. A dog smells in my trunk. And he closes the trunk, and he tells the van, you can move. And the van moves away, and we park in parking space 3. 3. Now, people are lined up because the door to AT&T is right there. There's big old long lines, and they're going into the game. And we're sitting there, and of course, I said, Rick, let's just sit here for a minute. We are never going to get to park this close ever again. This is it. This is it, bud. And we just sat there. And some guy tried to buy one of our silver tickets, and we were tempted, but we knew we were going into a situation where we'd have to pretend we knew the guy. So we didn't do it. So we start to get out, and a guy comes over, and he's got a green jacket on. And he says, Mr. Smith, come this way. And I'm like, he knows my name? And we go in another door. And he takes us up a private staircase. And when we get up to the top, there's these giant doors, as tall as that right there, big, giant glass doors, and they're frosted over. And they say, excuse us, we have to wait just a second because the Jones family is taking a picture just inside. To which I said, what? Tell them we're here. Get out of the way. No, I didn't do that. So immediately, and in just a couple of seconds, they open these doors, and you go in, and there's televisions everywhere, and there's a big mirror. The biggest bar of liquor you've ever seen goes all the way across, probably a quarter of a mile. And there's food laid out, all kinds of food, any kind of food you can think about. And they tell us when we get to the box, and Jerry Jones's box is right here. This guy's box is right here. So you can peek over into Jerry Jones' box. They ask you not to. I think Rick and I took a couple peeks anyway, but and then we get you in there and they say, now listen, don't eat much food in the first half because the good food comes out in the second half. Well, I had perused the food coming in and I thought it looked pretty good. So Rick and I go out there, can't help ourselves, and we get all this food. Nobody else is getting food, and we go in there and we eat our food in the first half. So halftime comes, we're not hungry, but the good food is out there. And everybody leaves except for me and Rick. A couple minutes later, this little guy rolls in and says, hello? It's the governor, Governor Abbott. So Rick and I have about 30 minutes with Governor Abbott on an election day the next day. The next Tuesday, next 2 days. No, the next day, Monday night. So we sit down, we're talking to Governor Abbott. You know, we're talking politics. We're talking about Beto running against, and the whole thing. And we get talking to him. He's the nicest guy in the world. You would not know that he's a big shot. Based on those kind of people who have achieved something like that, when you meet them, they become even more impressive. But I'll tell you, the most impressive famous person I ever met, ever in my life, I was 6 or 7 years old. I think it was 1956. Disneyland had opened in 1955, July 17th. Disneyland is over 160 acres. Now, when you're a little kid, that's monstrous. And it's just this big theme park. And I'd been watching the Disney program, The Musketeers, Skip and Marty. Remember Skip and Marty? Somebody, anybody? Help me out. Okay. And they all had these adventures. And when I got to Disneyland, I could not wait to get to Frontierland. All I could think about was Frontierland. I brought all my cowboy gear, and I had it all on. I didn't care about the monorail or the mountain that you go down. None of that. Take me to Frontierland. It was probably this big, but it had tunnels and caves and things you could climb and pretend to shoot at everybody. You know, I killed Mickey a couple of times, you know. So that's where I wanted to get. Well, when you go to Disneyland, and I had never been there. My parents are going, we're going all for the first time. And by the way, it cost $17 million in 1955 to build. I don't even have any idea what it's worth today, but it's phenomenal. So I'm sitting on this thing called a tram. They're picking us up because they park you way out, but then they bus you in on this tram thing. And sitting on the tractor is Walt Disney with a hat, like he's the conductor. And we're getting on, and he looks at me and my brother, and he said, "Hey, tell me your name." "Steve and Larry." "Okay, jump up here right by me." And he starts talking to us. I'm talking to Walt Disney. And I'm 6 or 7, and I realize this is a big deal. And then later, when we'd go back, Walt Disney might be at the front greeting everybody. And I swear, I think he remembered my name a couple of times. And then another time you'd see him, and he'd be in a striped red jacket, and he'd have a pair of white pants on. He'd be on Main Street sweeping up trash. That's greatness. That's a man with an ambition that I think was God-given, and he took that ambition and he did the best with it, and it never changed who he was. Matter of fact, it magnified who he was. So if you want to know anything about Walt Disney, ask me. I'm a Walt Disney expert. I know all about Walt Disney. Matter of fact, there's a great story that Art Linkletter wrote about in his book. Walt Disney was visioning the park, and he was telling all of the people that were on his board about it, and they sent Linkletter with him to calm him down. Said he's going to take us into bankruptcy. And so they're riding around the orange groves in Anaheim, California, and Art Linkletter's in the car, and he says, "Art, I'm going to build a park. It's going to be right here." And Art Linkletter says, "Well, you know, the city's got a lot of parks." He goes, "No, not that kind of park." And he starts talking about, you know, all these lands, and Cinderella and Mickey Mouse and all the stuff they're going to have, and people will come from miles. And he said, "What you need to do, I'm going to buy all these orchards here. You need to buy all these orchards over here and put hotels on them, because people will come from far and wide to go to the park." And Art Linkletter said, "I never bought an acre, and I hated myself from that point on." Ambition's not a bad thing if you keep it in the right spot. Here's the definition: an ardent desire for rank, fame, or power. The desire for personal advancement and a willingness to strive to attain it. A passion to be both popular and powerful. A desire to achieve a particular end. Here's the hard thing about the bad side of ambition. It affects everybody. Everybody is smitten with it. I talked about greed last week, and that's another thing that we're all hit with. But ambition, we all are ambitious. And ambitious gets in the way of ministry, and I'm going to explain why. Let me give you some eloquent reminders about ambition. One comes from Dr. Martin Luther King. He said, "Every man must decide whether he will walk in the light of creative altruism or in the darkness of destructive selfishness." That's ambition. Destructive selfishness. And then there's a Cromwell. Thomas Cromwell was actually a real person who served King Henry VIII until King Henry VIII didn't like his opinion and he cut his head off. But in Shakespeare's King Henry VIII, it says, "I charge thee, fling away ambition. By that sin fell the angels." Ambition. The desire, the ardent desire to be greater, to be bigger. You know, how likely are we to see people calm down about ambition? If you're a Wall Street executive and you're told, "Hey, back off on the ambition. Try not to achieve as much as you're seeking to achieve." While he's climbing up the ladder, while he's doing all he does. What about Google executives? What if we just politely ask them to back off their ambition a little bit? Think about human rights and some other things that are important to us? What about Elon Musk or Jerry Jones? These kind of people, they're driven by ambition. In our culture, we are driven by it. You show me a college athlete, a decorated college athlete who's just about to be the first round pick by some major league ball team or some pro football team, you don't see a lot of humility. You see a lot of ambition, because that's what they want to reward. They want to reward that hard kind of competitiveness. They want to see that. They want you to achieve and achieve for them. So, how it worked according to Solomon, in Proverbs 15, 32 and 33, he says, if you reject discipline, you only harm yourself. But if you listen to correction and you grow in understanding, the fear of God teaches wisdom. Humility precedes honor. Humility precedes honor. It's a theme. In 18:12, he says, haughtiness goes before destruction. Humility precedes honor. I mean, haughtiness. You know where you can see a lot of haughtiness? Any guess? Church. A lot of haughtiness in church. A lot of dressed up, man, look at me. And that's just from the pulpit. Right? A lot of not sincerity, but this haughtiness about what we're able to achieve. And the truth is, the only antidote for ambition out of control is humility. Humility. And you will find humility, or it will find you in the form of humiliation. Especially if you're one of God's own. In Proverbs 22:4, he says, true humility and fear of the Lord lead to riches, honor, and a long life. It's one of the things about ambition that they don't tell you. You stay keyed up, you stay worked up over trying to achieve and get more and be more and do more, and climbing all over people and being what you have to be to get to your end. That'll take years off your life. It says, let someone else praise you, not your own mouth. A stranger, not your own lips. Have you ever met anybody in your work and you want to compliment them, but they never let you because they're so busy complimenting themselves? You ever met anybody like that? We've been around people like that, where all they do is talk about what they've done and what they're doing and how important what they're doing is. And they go on and on and on, and they'll even do that in meetings. And what happens is, it's like everything else you're doing has a level of unimportance compared to what it is that they're doing. You know, and when something else comes up that's not about their thing, they back off, they don't listen, sometimes leave the room, but sometimes interrupt and go right back to their stuff. Shine the light on me. It's my ambition. I'm going to set the world on fire. I'm the greatest. So, let me get you to Mark chapter 10. Let's look at verses 32 through 33, and this is a setup. This is a setup of where Jesus is and what's going on. And so I want to bring you to it. The ministry itself is on a roll. They can't do anything wrong. I mean, this is like a hitter in the middle of the season, and everything that comes up looks like a beach ball, and he's hitting it out of the ballpark. I mean, the ministry, everything they touch seems to be going golden, platinum. Just working well, everything. And it says, and they were now on their way to Jerusalem. Now remember, Jesus had said things to them like, I go to Jerusalem to die. But they were so busy being ambitious as the disciples went right over their head. And he says, and Jesus was walking ahead of them. And the disciples were filled with awe. And the people followed behind were overwhelming with fear. Taking the 12 disciples aside, Jesus once more began to describe everything that was about to happen to him. And he said, listen, now understand, they're moving, and Jesus is walking out front of them, and the disciples are just behind them, and then the crowd This huge crowd is following Jesus into Jerusalem. And they're following him because they had seen miracles, because he had done things, and the ministry is hotter than it's ever been. Big time. You ever been at a big Christian conference, and then one of the lead guys come in, and he's got his little entourage with him, his 12 disciples. They walk in like the Jesus Mafia. They prance around, they all get down front. A lot of hoopla, a lot of ooh, wow. And, I'm thinking, his pants went on just like mine. I don't know why he thinks he's so special. So he says to them, listen. It's not, hey, listen, got to tell you something. No, it's, hey, focus. Look at me. Because he realizes where they are. He realizes they're all caught up in the dark side of the ambition. And he said, we are going to Jerusalem where the Son of Man will be betrayed to the leading priests and the teachers of religious law. And they will sentence him to die and hand him over to the Romans. He's saying to them, he's been talking to them about this along the way. But he finally stops them and he says, pay attention. Listen. Everybody up here. You ever had anybody do that to you? We used to have a coach. He'd get 4 or 5 guys around him. Hey, right here. And if your eyes weren't there quick enough, he'd grab that mouth, the guard on your helmet, and he'd pull you up. And he'd say, right here, pay attention. That's what Jesus did. And he looked at the disciples and he said, the Son of Man, that would be me, we're going into Jerusalem, and the Pharisees are going to get their way. Everything they've been trying to do, they are going to accomplish. They're going to take me, they're going to beat me, they're going to whip me, they're going to hand me over to the Romans, and the Romans are going to kill me. Have you got it? Nod your head. And I can just imagine them kind of going, wow, I wonder why he's so grumpy. Because of the amount of ambition. They're not understanding. They're not hearing. How many times did Jesus tell them over and over again, I'm going to die, but then on the third day I'll rise again? And then they're surprised when he rises again. And he told them over and over and over, but ambition had blinded them. So he's predicting his death. And in verses 34 through 36, he said, they will mock him, still talking about himself. They will spit on him. They will flog him with a whip, and they will kill him. But after 3 days, he will rise again. Okay? Have you guys got it? Do you understand it? I am getting ready to go through horrific days. They're going to beat me to an inch of my life. Then they're going to put me up on a cross, and they are going to kill me. And then in 3 days, I will rise again. Now, this is fascinating. Look at what happens next. Then James and John, the son of Zebedee, came over and spoke to him. Now, you'd think they'd come over and want to comfort, right? Want to say something like Peter was saying, hey, let's rethink going to Jerusalem. You would think they would want to comfort him in some way. Look at what they say. Teacher, they said, we want you to do us a favor. How would you feel? How would you feel if you were Jesus? Your guys, your team, the guys you're counting on to start the church, to keep it going, to be you when you're gone. And you just told them you're going to die this horrible death, and you're going to be dead for 3 days, and then you're going to rise again. And they pull you aside, and it's as trite as this. Hey, Jesus, we want to ask you a favor, and we want you to say yes before we tell you what it is, okay? You want to do that? Did your kids ever do that to you? Hey, Dad, hey, tell you what, there's something we want to ask you. It's a big deal. And we want you to tell us yes before we ask you. Well, as a father, I know the answer is immediately no, whatever it is, right? Because they're sneaking up on me. They're going to, who knows what they're going to ask. And he says, what is your request? He asked. And I'm pretty sure it took him a minute to kind of just take a step back and a deep breath. You know, and what's happening here is my favorite made-up word, a word I made up, ignorance. Ignorance. Now, ignorance is when your ignorance and your arrogance are colliding and you're talking. And we got ignorance going. You ever found yourself talking and realized, oop, I got a little ignorance going here. I'm acting like I'm the smartest guy in the room, and I'm not. That's what was happening. Their ignorance had kicked in. Why? Because of ambition. And then they make their request. In verse 37 through 39, it says, they replied, when you sit on your glorious throne, you know, not a word about, we hate it what you're going to have to go through. That's awful. You know, there's something about what they're doing that is so incredibly human. Have you ever had someone who was going through something absolutely desperate and horrible? They've just been told you're going into hospice. And so the family's going to come in. And somebody in the family says, hey, uncle, can I have your car? Right? Hey, I've been there. I've been at the bedside and heard the ignorance. And this is at its peak. And they say, when you come to your glorious throne, yeah, we know you're going to be big time. We know you got this. We want to sit in a place of honor next to you. One on your right and the other on your left. Huh? What do you think? It's a good request, right? Hey, and we don't care. You can put John on the right or you can put him on the left. He doesn't care. You can put me on the right, put me on the left. I don't care. But you know what? You get the middle. You get to keep that middle seat because you're the biggie. We just want to be next to you. We're going to be right here, packed in. I just, you know, I think about things like in a dramatic form, and I'm thinking, Jesus must have had to gather himself for a minute. He must have had to think, let's see, you all have been with me for 3 years, and this is what you got? This is the best you got? He doesn't scold them. Matter of fact, he's incredibly nice to them. He says, but Jesus said to them, you don't know what you are asking. Are you able to drink from the bitter cup of suffering I am about to drink? Are you able to be baptized with the baptism of suffering that I must be baptized with? Oh, yes, they replied. You know, the questions are firm and they're rhetorical. Have you ever seen somebody in a class and the professor asks an idiot question that's rhetorical and the person would go, yeah, we can do that. It's the wrong time for that. It's the wrong time for that to happen. And I'm sure, again, he had to just gather himself. Oh, yes, they replied, we're able. Then Jesus told them, you will indeed drink from my bitter cup, and you will be baptized with my baptism of suffering. And he's letting them know, oh, you'll martyr out. You too will suffer. James, about 3 years after I'm gone, they will cut your head off. And John, they will attempt to kill you, but you're stronger than a boot, and so they'll send you to the island of Patmos. Not a nice place, by the way, just a rock. And they'll boil you in oil, and you won't die because you have to write the book of Revelation, but you will suffer. You will be a part of the suffering, but you have no idea what you're asking for. So, all of them were struggling. All 12 of them were struggling. In Mark 10, 40 and 41, it says, "But I have no right to say who will sit on my right or on my left. God has prepared those places for the ones he has chosen." And when the 10 other disciples heard what James and John had asked, they were indignant. They got mad at James and John. And Jesus is announcing this to all of them. They asked Jesus the question in private, and he answers it in public. And basically he said, not mine to even do. Third person in the Trinity, not my call. It's the Father's call. He will choose who will do that. I'm immensely interested. Like when I die, one of my first Jesus questions is going to be, who's on your right and who's on your left? I'm guessing it ain't James and John. Just guessing. Just guessing. Yeah. I think Father's somewhere interrupting that seating arrangement that they had. So he tells all of his disciples, and he says it because he knew they were indignant. He knew they were talking about it. It's human nature to compare and to want and to compete and to have an intention for power, to be hungry for power. It's unbelievable how it happens. And you look at it and you want to do better. You want to be better. You want to recognize that's not. Really? The desire to be great was in all of them. Matter of fact, a chapter earlier, in chapter 9, 33 through 35, it says, after they arrived in Capernaum, so this has been going on for a couple days, after they arrived in Capernaum and they settled into a house, Jesus asked his disciples, what were you discussing on the road? But they didn't answer because they had been arguing about which of them would be the greatest. That's why they were indignant. James and John hit him before they could get to him. Don't you know Peter and Andrew were coming with the same identical question? Probably the only one of the disciples that was laid back on this would have been a disciple you hear very little about. It would have been Bartholomew, because Bartholomew was, by Jesus' definition, a man without guile, a man of great humility. But the rest of them were wondering, hey, where's my greatness? Where am I going to be? And he sat down and he called the 12 over to him and he said, whoever wants to be first must take the last place and be the servant of everyone else. If you don't hear anything else I say, hear that. Hear that. Let that sink in. You've heard it your entire Christian life. If you want to be first, be last. Be a servant of all. Be that guy. Be that person. I'll never forget, when I was at First Euless, they were having, it was like a preach-a-thon thing, and I was working at the time. I was working for Levi, and I took days off so I could be there for the preach-a-thon during the day. They had every major voice. I mean, you guys like Adrian Rogers, Stephen Alford. I mean, heroes of mine that I wanted to hear. And so I was going to just take days off and just sit and listen to preaching. And the cafeteria was all set up and people could come in and get food. And I watched these great preachers come in. And I watched them all come in. And they would come in and they would be nice and they would smile, and they all went over where the preachers were going to sit, and they sat. And I just watched all of them, their demeanor. And it wasn't awful. It wasn't bad. I was like in a little hero worship looking at all of them, just getting a glance, just happy to say hi or get a little wave from one of them. But I watched one of them. One of them. I watched him walk in, and he peeled off from the rest of them. And he walked into the kitchen. And when we got in the kitchen, he said, "Who have I got in here?" And one lady turned around and introduced herself. And he said, "Thank you for fixing us lunch. What are we having?" And another lady said something. And he got every one of their names. And he talked to them. And he spent time with them. And he thanked them for serving. And he said, "It all smells so good. I've been smelling it out in the hall. And this is just, This is awesome. And then he stood there at the window with them, and he said, I'll do this. He put an apron on, and because they were short-handed, and he starts putting the meat on the plate and handing it to the other one. They put something else on it and handed it out. And I thought, there's your guy. You know, we say all the time, practice what you preach. That's backwards. That's backwards. Preach what you practice. You know who that biggie preacher was? Adrian Rogers. The biggest of the bunch. The best. I mean, the prince of preachers in his prime. He walked in there and met those ladies. And at every break, he was in there talking to those ladies, taking care of those ladies, and talking to the people that were setting the tables up. The rest of the guys, they were hanging with each other, talking with each other. Not anything bad, just not being last, not being a servant of all. So the kingdom versus our culture. In verses 42 and 45, it says, so Jesus called them together, and he said, you know that the rulers of this world lord it over people and officials, and they flaunt their authority over those under them. But among you it will be different. Whoever wants to be the leader among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first among you must be the slave of everyone else. For even if the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others, to give his life as a ransom for many. You know what he's saying to them? He's saying, although we've had a tough time, and I've been difficult trying to communicate to you, and you're not listening well, you will know this. You will become servants of others. No matter what position you rise to, as the first church in the first century goes, Peter, you're going to be an amazing evangelist, and thousands are going to come to know Christ because the power of the Holy Spirit is going to be on you. But you be the slave of them. You die to self. James, you're going to run the Jerusalem church, and you're going to have a lot of authority. And Thomas, you're going to walk all the way to India, and you're going to lead people to Christ. All of them had something that they were going to do, and he was explaining to them what their position would be. But the main thing about it, the foundational thing about it was, you will be the servant of others. Sometimes we miss it. Sometimes we get to a place and we just get dissatisfied for some reason because our ambition hasn't been fed, or things didn't go the way we thought it ought to go. Y'all know I love Jimmy Draper. Talk about him a lot. Jimmy Draper took probably one of the best jobs, maybe one of the most important jobs in the Southern Baptist Convention. When he left First Julius, he became the head of Lifeway. I don't know if you know this, but Lifeway was the number three producer of books in the world. Think about all the major book people that are out there, Lifeway, and they were doing it all with just Christian material. And so to be called to be the president of Lifeway was a big deal. Huge. And they would pick the best of the best. And they decided that was Jimmy Draper. And he got there, and the guy that had been the president before him, you had to call him Dr. So-and-so. And he lived up on the top floor, and he was all over the whole top floor. And he had his own gymnasium and his own library and this great big giant office and a big room to meet with people in. And when Jimmy got there, first thing he said is he said, I really don't like riding elevators. He said, I noticed that this office right down here is empty. And they said, oh, yes, sir, Dr. Draper, but that's not a very big office. And he looked at it. Yeah, it looks plenty big. I would love to be in that office. I like to see people coming and going. It's right across from our library, right? And they said, yeah. And he said, yeah, just give me a little spot in that library for my stuff. He said, I'll just be down here. And he said, I like it down here because he said, I can run get a Dr. Pepper real quick. And And they said, sir, we got to deal with Coca-Cola. And Jimmy said, okay, everybody look the other way while I bring my Dr. Pepper in. I'll get a little refrigerator in my office, but I want my office to be down here. I want it to be close. I want to see when people are going to eat. I want to see when people are moving around. And then when they installed him, and he had to get up and make a speech, and he said, you know, all of you have been asking me what you should call me. And he said, so I'm going to explain it to you. He said, if you want to call me what education has done for me, you can call me Dr. James T. Draper. And he said, if you want to call me what my family has done for me, you want to call me James T. Draper Jr. He said, but if you're just going to call me what God has done for me, saved my soul, set me free, given me the victory, I would love it if you would remind me of that. I'm Brother Jimmy. You talk about change a culture overnight. Boom, culture changed. And he was there about a year, and I had him at Glorietta. I was doing a singles conference there, and I had Brother Jimmy to come speak. I couldn't wait for them to hear Brother Jimmy, and so we get at lunch, and I said, okay, you got to tell me, what's the greatest thing that's happened to you as the president of Lifeway? And he said, the greatest thing? And I said, yeah. He said, well, I was sitting in church, and he said, they made a call for people to work with 6-year-olds. And he said, I realized for the first time in my entire ministry, I was free to do something. And he said, I thought 6-year-olds would be great. He said, so I volunteer, and I have a 6-year-old class. And he starts going through the names of the 6-year-olds and telling me all about them. And I'm blown away. Why? Because I'm sitting with somebody who gets it, who understands it. That the greatest thing for him was that he got to have a Sunday school class of 6-year-old boys. Not that he got to be the big shot. Not that he got to be the guy calling all the shots. But that he got to do a Sunday school class. I'm humbled by that. I'm challenged by that. So, how do you hold ambition in check? It's a great question. How do you do that? You know, some people that are just great at what they do and gifted, and that's not everybody that has to hold in check ambition. Those of us who are a lesser light are as ambitious, if not more. If you've never achieved squat in your life, you still have a desire to be ambitious, to be powerful, to have control over something. And if you've never achieved anything, you'll try to take control over something that you shouldn't even be about. You'll become some kind of awful ambitious person within your family to make sure everybody does what you say. So we got to watch how to check ambition, how to make sure ambition is in check at all times. First thing is, remember you are a kingdom dweller. We aren't of this world. We're not. That's when Jesus was talking to his disciples, he was saying, you know, all these things that stepping over people, that won't be said of you. That's not who you are. You are a kingdom dweller. And if you're going to keep ambition in check, you need to remember that. Oh, I'm one of the ones that are supposed to be humbled. I'm one of the ones that are supposed to be full of grace and joy because I understand that God saved me. I understand that he died on the cross and gave his blood like we heard sung. I'm one of those. I'm one of those who gets to know that when I die, I have heaven. I'm one of those that am rich if I never have a dime. I'm one of those. I don't need to be ambitious. I just need to be his. I'm one of those. You're one of those. And why on earth we don't behave like it is because the dark side of ambition. Second thing, release your desire for the things of this world. How many times have you heard that? Last week when I was talking to you about greed, I was talking to you about let things go. You don't want to be greedy? Figure out what you're greedy about and give it away. So it'll go away. So you won't have to stare at it. You don't have to be greedy about it anymore. You just walk away. This is the most difficult thing in our world because our world keeps feeding us with the lie. The lie that if you get more, if you have more, if you get this thing, if you got that thing, if you get entertained this way, it'll work better for you. You'll feel better. You won't. You won't. There's not anything I could name in the entertainment world, in anything physical, in the pill drug world, in the alcoholic world, in the culture out there. There's not anything I could name. Not anything. Not any kind of fun or entertainment or anything that you think would just make your day. That would give you a charge for anything over than about 3 minutes. And when that 3 minutes is gone, it becomes a burden. A burden. I don't know how I got stuck in it, but I'm watching YouTube, and I started watching people selling lakefront property. Right? You ought to watch one of those. And, I'm thinking, wait a minute, I've been at the lake. Lake's got a lot of bugs and slimy things. The water goes down, then the water comes up too high. I've been at the lake. Well, they talk about it like it's just, whoo. You'll live 100 years longer. You'll see sunsets and sunrises. Yeah, right. You'll spend money at the dock. That's what will happen to you. Lots of it. Let go. Let go. There's so many people in the kingdom of God, they can't let go of a tenth of what they make. They can't even give back. They can't let go of anything. The way the culture thinks is we're supposed to get all we can all we get, and then sit on the can. That's the culture. And God is saying it's all stuff. It's okay for you to have it. It's not wrong to be rich. It's not wrong to go get stuff and run through it and have a joyful life. Just don't make it your God. Don't make it your ambition. Don't make it all that you are. Make it whatever God intends for you to make it, but give it away. Let it go. I was asked to consult with a guy, a nonprofit that I know. They said, we want you to come consult with this guy because he's got a big company in Dallas. If I mention the name, you'd go, ooh. And he makes millions and millions of dollars, and we would like for him to give to our ministry. We would like for him to really do that. But he needs consulting because he's confused about how to give. And I said, okay. So I went to lunch with a guy. Nice guy. Wonderful guy. Brand new Christian. I mean, just rescued from hell. Ready to do anything for anybody. And so, and he said, are you here? You here to ask me for money for that group? And I said, well, they sent me here for that, but let's talk about some other things first. It's not my job. That's their job to ask you for that. I said, but let me try to kind of dig in with you a little bit. Tell me what you're doing. Who are you giving to? And he's newly saved. He said, I'm given to my church. I give to my church, and I'm given. They have a school, so I'm given to the school. And he said, and then there's 7 or 8 kids that are going to seminary, and I'm paying their way through seminary. And there's a couple missionaries. I can't even remember their names, but I'm giving to them. And then there's this guy. He's got some sort of music thing he's doing, and I'm giving to him. And so I'm sitting there writing them down. And when I got done, I said, "There's 21 people on your list." And he goes, "Yeah." He said, "I'm wore out." He said, "I got a lot of money and I could continue to give, but I'm gived out. You know what I mean? Not money-wise, but just emotionally." I said, "Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We'll add theirs in because they're paying for lunch." And so I added theirs in. And I said, "Let me help you. Let me help you. You're rich. You're well-known. You come to Christ. You walk an aisle at church. You get your hand shook. Everybody's breath just gets taken away because you're a big shot. You're a rich guy. And here they all come. Why? Because they have passions and ambition for what they're doing, and they think their thing is the only thing. And I said, what do you know about these kids you're sending through seminary? Nothing. I know their names because I'm writing them checks. Okay? What do you know about this? What do you know about that ministry? Nothing. And I said, let me give you a rule of thumb. Tithe. I'm tithing. I said, now, find 3 things that are close to your heart. 3 things. No more than 3. Matter of fact, try to get it down to 2. And be absolutely meaningful financially to those things. And tell everybody else, God bless you, I will pray for you. And when you go to their banquets, pay for your chicken dinner and go home. And he said, I can do that. And I said, yeah, I think that's what God wants you to do. And you could see him just relax. And we went through his list, and he circled 2 or 3 things that were absolutely meaningful. The school was meaningful to him. To send at least one of those people to seminary was meaningful to him. And to tithe. And there was one other little ministry that he was able to talk about, had something to do with kids. I said, okay. I said, there you are. Now go be meaningful. Go give big checks to those people because you got it. And then tell everybody else, God love you, but I'm giving here. He said, thanks. And he said, I can't thank you enough. And I said, it's okay. And he said, your group didn't make the list. And I said, I know, it's okay. It's all right, don't worry about it. God will provide. And he said, well, can I just give some just because this was helpful for me? And I said, yeah, but don't make them a regular. And he said, well, no, I feel like I ought to give something to them because this was good for me. He said, this will make everybody around me better. And I said, well, okay. So he pulls his checkbook out and writes me a $20,000 check. And I said, oh, they'll be happy. They'll be happy. I said, they had you planned out in their heads how much you were going to give over the next 10 years. You've covered their nut. I said, all those other people have that too. They plan out of their ambition what I need to ask and what I need to get. Just the way it goes. Release the world. This is the most difficult thing. Then the other part is return to God's priorities for your life. Some of you have been knowing Jesus for years and years and years. And maybe you've never seriously sat down and thought about what are God's priorities for me? What does God want me to do? And where can I do it? And what should it look like? And how? Well, one of God's priorities, number 1 priority, is once you find him, to know him better. Get into his word. Begin to learn his word. Begin to be around people that are teaching his word. Put yourself in a place where you're hearing God's word. I look over here, Dottie's over here. Dottie's not feeling good. Dottie has a situation where she went blind. And there's somebody staying home watching this online because they got a hangnail. Right? She's an excuse buster. And she's going to stay humble because she slept through what I just said. So that's a good deal. That's okay. That's okay. We had a little COVID, little excitement for 2-3 years, right? Who even knows what it was? And it has devastated the church. People have stayed home because they were frightened and afraid. And they stopped coming. And for a while, that was an okay thing to do. That was probably a smart thing to do. But guess what? And I'll tell it to everybody watching online. It's over. Okay? Nobody even has to wear a mask anymore. They have decided that whoever's had the medicine, who hasn't had the medicine, you're all going to get it at some point in time. It's a sinus infection. Move on. Come back to church. Come back where you're supposed to be, in the family of God. Get your priorities straight. Get in a Bible study class. Get moving. Get moving for God. Yeah, I mean, We got the best Bible teachers in the world in Sandy and Stan. If you're an adult and you want to know the Bible, I can't think of two. I would recommend both of them to you. Go get there. I tell you, returning to God's priorities means that some of you need to speed it up, need to get it moving, need to start asking God, what's God want me to do? Even in your giving, in everything, in every part of your life, God, give me the priorities that you have for me. I will embrace them gladly. Ambition has a dark side. I'm going to end with a biblical encouragement for you. It comes out of Jeremiah 9, verses 23 and 24. It says, this is what the Lord says, if you're looking for a priority. Don't let the wise boast of their wisdom, or the powerful boast of their power, or the rich boast of their riches. But those who wish to boast should boast in this alone, that they truly know me and understand that I am the Lord, who demonstrates unfailing love and who brings justice and righteousness to the earth, and that I delight in these things. I, the Lord, have spoken. Let me sum up my sermon in 2 words. Get over yourself and get moving for God. Father, help us. Help us when the dark side of ambition begins to attack us, even if we're not accomplishing anything, but we feel like we should, and we look at others, and we become jealous and frustrated, and we get filled with ignorance. God, help us. Help us. You're all we have. You're all we need. May we recognize that clearly and totally in Jesus' name. Amen.